So welcome back guys to another video, and this, of course, if you read the title, is about the MONOPOSTO beta with all the different eras now in Formula 1. We have eras from the 2000s all the way to 2026, of course, the current version of regulations in Formula 1. So you can see we've got the 2026, 2025, 2024, 2018 and 2017 as well. Then we jump down to 2012, 2007 and 2000s in the era of cars back then. In the 2000s era, you just saw it a bit earlier, the cars were very much tailored and influenced, you can tell, by the Ferrari cars of those times. We're here with the R27, and this was the Renault back then, but of course it could look a bit weird due to the fact that they are heavily influenced on the Ferraris of those years. In the 2012 chassis, you can see that very intricate nose there, the very interesting nose on these cars, which I think was the most recognizable part of the 2012 chassis. Of course, we got the Cadillac in the 2026 livery on the 2012, which is pretty cool in my opinion, and there's a bunch of other liveries that would be made on these chassis as well when the game fully releases. So I'll show you the other eras later, but let's start with the 2000 chassis, where we can show you all the new parts and features with this era. Of course, you can see the detail on especially the side pods, and then you can see here the grooved tires on the side. Of course, back then we did not have slick tires on the cars, so you can see the grooves in those soft tires at the moment. Of course, they had different names for the tires back then as well, but you can also see, as I mentioned earlier, the side pods. Those are very extreme elements on the side pods there, so that is a very nice touching detail added to these cars. Of course, as I said, very influenced by the Ferrari. But in terms of the drivability of these cars, we're here in the intermediate conditions in the wet here. These cars are very understeery, but you can see on the right hand side we've got fuel. Yeah, we got fuel. Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Don't mind that crash. But like I said, the car's very understeery. Maybe it was just my driving style, I don't know, but I definitely had to get used to these cars because I just kept understeering into the wall, corner after corner, especially in Sector 3 here at Azerbaijan. Of course, these cars never raced over at Baku back then, so it is a bit of a weird one to be driving these cars at much newer circuits here.
You will have better luck in the future. You will have better luck in the future. You will have better luck in the future. Better luck in the future. Better luck in the future. We have to retire. I'm so sorry.
Anyways, back to the 2007 liveries. Of course, this chassis not too different from the 2000s, but a pretty much matured and evolved version of those chassis, still with the very extreme side pod elements and aerodynamic parts on the sides of the livery as well, very pronounced there on the side pods, which is a very good thing. They look pretty much identical to the real cars from there, especially the front wing. That is probably the most interesting part again of these cars. But one thing to note with the AI, they now back off a bit more into corners, which is a very, very good, I think I've just noticed it in my recording over here. So they back off much more into corners so that you won't be getting impeded into corners, even though they slow down before the corners as well. So that's a good thing. But in terms of the drivability of these cars, they are less understeery than the 2000 era cars, but still, of course, you need to really be on it in terms of how to drive the car, because you can at times maybe turn the car a bit too much into corners. And of course, we have got no DRS and no battery. That is another thing here, as well as the fuel and the groove tires. We just have to be based on pure driving skill, I guess.
We will have better luck in the future.
So anyway, these cars are pretty good. I think I like these cars better than the 2000 cars in terms of probably the looks of the cars as well as the driving. That is probably a bit easier, as the 2000 cars probably a bit understeery. So moving on to the 2012 chassis, I think this might actually be the best looking chassis of the lot in the eras so far. Of course, we've got the RB22 over in the 2012 chassis. Of course, we showed you the Cadillac earlier. This is another one of the 2026 liveries in the older cars. So this looks very cool, especially with different sponsors in different places according to the chassis itself. You can see the A, T and T logo on the front wing as well, and the rear wing a lot thinner, which I think I like about these cars as well. Especially, of course, the obvious part is the nose being very high up from that rest of the front wing, you could say. So as we now go into qualifying in Brazil, it was a bit interesting with these cars. Not understeery, I should say, but harder to turn the car, because then you'd get a bit of like white smoke from turning a bit too aggressively in corners. I think that's a common theme with these 2012 cars at the moment. But of course, that might just be, again, the amount of like steering assist and like anti-spin that you have on. Of course, I'm running 10 anti-spin and I think 10 steering help as well, and then I've got none on driving help, so that probably doesn't help with the lockups into corners and the smoke particles, you could say, as I turn through sector 2 now in the winding S's, you could say, long winding S's over here in Brazil. But overall, I think these cars are quite actually nice to drive. I don't get as much understeer, which is good. I prefer oversteer in my opinion. It's easier to drive that way when you're like fighting the car against it that way, if that makes sense. But I think these cars are probably the best ones that we've explored so far. Well, when you're actually pushing the car, I should say, that of course, like, I didn't really make much mistakes. We went a bit like wide at times, but other than that, that's just normal stuff that happens when you're pushing the car. But I felt with like the 2000 liveries and the 2007 chassis as well, it was a lot harder to keep the car on track, but maybe that's just me. And of course, one thing to worry about is the curves over there. You don't want to use all of it on one lap, but on one part of the lap, I should say, because you won't get any more curves until the next lap. So it's a bit of a weird one to try and figure out, especially for newer Formula 1 fans who don't really know too much about curves. But into a race condition we go. It's dry for this one. We're starting dead last because our qualifying wasn't the best, I could say, but we're now trying to make our way past the Mercedes and then another, I think, Mercedes, then past the Sauber into turn 1, and then there's 2 wide up ahead, 3 wide further up ahead. We tried to take it around the outside, but then there's yellow flags, I think, in behind, so we're gonna have to wait on this straight behind a few cars for now. But the AI are not different, I should say. They're pretty normal, what you'd expect from, I think, at least 2026 AI, defending, attacking as well, choosing different lines, which is a big improvement from what we used to have like a few years back. But we make our way past those 2 cars up to the top 10 already in this 3-lap race, now into the more technical part of the lap in sector 2, into a kind of deep braking zone, making our way past Mantiol, and then up ahead 3 wide. It's between a Ferrari and a Red Bull over there. We trying to make it 3 wide as well, but the Ferrari, a bit of movement under braking there, you could see as we go into the right hand, and now we're trying to find that gap, but a bit of dirty air, you could say, from the Ferrari up ahead. But now we go wide again up on the straight, and it's a collision further back with another car that probably wasn't his fault. But we are now on the inside line. We have no more curves left, and we are going to have to surely just remain to the inside and get the move back up into P8. We go at
we have to retire. I'm so sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. But to round it all off for these chassis, I think this is one of the best looking chassis of the ones we've covered, at least so far. Of course, we move on to the newer versions of regulations, but this one I think is very memorable and outstanding, you could say, especially with the nose and such. So that's probably why I like it so much. But now moving on to the 2017 chassis, and here we've got the McLaren from the 2017 season. Of course, not the fastest McLaren, but still a very cool looking one in terms of delivery, I think. And of course, you've got that big, massive shark fin type element at the back as well. So that makes this car look a bit, I think, extra cool here. But of course, you've got the finer details like the extension bit on the side pods and the rear wing end plates as well. They have a bit of a weird design on the back, which of course is realistic to how it was back then. Of course, there's still no halo. This was the last season without the halo, the last of these eras without the halo as well. So pretty cool. But new feature I want to show you is that there's a pro sim mode as well. So that's a bit of a change as to how you want to play when you first load up the game. But that is probably something we'll get into in another video. However, the driving with this car, I was a bit surprised with how fast I was going into the corners, not the corners. Anyways, after driving all the previous era cars for a bit, it was a bit of a shock to me how fast these modern cars are getting. So as you know, we had a bit of mistakes, although our skill issues kind of overmined the fact that these cars were actually like pretty fun to drive. The grip levels on this car was pretty insane, so it was fun to just like flick it around the corners and really send it. And that's probably something that I haven't experienced with the other eras that were previous to this one. So that's probably the best part about these cars, I think, as well. But of course we have the battery, which is back, and now we have the proper way to use DRS. Of course, in qualifying in 2012 you can use DRS wherever you please, but here there are DRS zones, of course. And as for the battery, you know, that's just mainly how it is today. But of course, still you deplete your battery a lot less, because that's how it was back then. Nowadays you burn through battery in the 2026 cars a lot faster than you could back then. But of course, you can see me setting a lap here is pretty hard to, yeah.
The car is damaged.
Anyways, so we'll take you through the rest of my actual lap here. After setting the first one, I was interrupted, let's say, by that red car. I'm not sure which team that was by, but moving into sector 2 now, you can see that you can really send it through the corners, and sometimes you get a bit too eager and brake a bit too late, go off track. As you can see there, we managed to keep it somewhat there. No track limit warning for some reason. I think we lifted off the throttle just about enough, and now we're moving through the final few corners we're 4 seconds up at the moment from our last lap, albeit we had a crash last time, so I'm not sure how competitive this will be. 4 seconds across the line, and it's just about a second off the time there, so not too bad in one of my first laps actually in this chassis of car. So yeah. So overall, these cars were actually pretty fun to drive. I'd say you can, if you really want that thrilling, fast experience when you're racing, these are the cars to go for, because they really like enable you to send it through the corners a lot more than the previous eras as well. But of course, you know, if you want anything faster, of course you go to the more recent cars with many more updates to the chassis as well. But anyways, we now move on to just 1 year later, the 2018 chassis. Of course, here we have got the 2021 livery from Lewis Hamilton back in that season. And these cars, I think, are probably the most accurate, although these are all very accurate cars to how they are in real life. This one is just very recognizable and very clear as to what era this is from. The previous cars, of course, it's harder to recognize because for me, I wasn't really alive back then in the 2000s. But anyways, we've got the Red Bull and the Mercedes from the 2021 season, of course, still using the 2018 chassis. And as for the drivability, it is a bit similar to the 2017 chassis of cars as well, but I feel like this chassis has a bit more understeer. I'd say it's very hard to turn through the corners. You can see there we almost crashed into the wall. Luckily the video stopped, so no one was harmed. But in terms of the actual racing, it's fun as well. You can see at Abu Dhabi racing between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Of course, the top left names, you can't really tell it's them, but you know, the cars give it away nonetheless. But in other notes, I think that especially the tyres, they look quite pronounced as well. I'm not sure what's so good about them, but these cars, you know, I think they're the most realistic. I'd say that's the best way to put it. They're the most accurate to IRL, I think, in my opinion. especially with that Red Bull when it's got the matte finish as well. It looks a lot like how it did back in 2018 and the years beyond that as well. But I say there's a lot of understeer. However, later on in the lap, I experienced a massive snapper oversteer here. It was a bit confusing, but of course I just got on the grass, not the grass, the gravel, just a bit too much there. But other than that, I think it's a quite understeery car, and that is the main part about it. Not as understeery as like the 2000, 2007 or like those cars, but it's still like a bit of understeer. But again, that can be altered with like setups. Of course, I'm not running any setup in this car as I drove it over here in Abu Dhabi. So with a few tweaks to setup and like assists within the game, that can be fixed easily. But this is just like with no work done for the whole thing. But overall, I think that the 2018 chassis is probably the best one so far. Up there, I think, with 2012. Those are probably my two favourite of the eras so far. But that's all the updated chassis. In terms of the current ones that we've always had in the game, the 2024 cars have gotten substantially bigger. They are, I think, almost the same size as the 2025 cars as well, but of course they still keep their like same attributes. But this one I think was needed to get bigger, because otherwise it'd be the same car, the same size as the previous cars, which wouldn't make sense at all, seeing as these cars were pretty big that ground fix era. So I think it was needed, but of course it's sad to see the size of the cars get bigger. It's harder for racing. As for 2025, these cars stay the same, but of course now we can actually zoom in to the liveries, which we couldn't always do back when it was just the 2026 cars with the 2025 and 2024. It was only on the 2026 version, but now of course it's available for all versions at the moment, so that is of course another cool feature. But as for the car itself, everything within it has stayed the same, and the same goes for the 2026 chassis as well. That is of course the same. But another thing I want to show you, this is the car on 9 surface, so it's been very much improved. You can actually see the sponsors now when you've got the car at full surface, so it could allow for maybe some different chrome effects as well, which could make deliveries look quite cooler. So that's about it for the video. Thank you guys for watching.